Hello, fellow readers. Today we are talking about this book. Just a singular book, but it is the first book I completed in 2024, and I'm not gonna lie, I think possibly it has set the bar pretty high for the rest of the books that follow in this year. So let's get into Forbidden Notebook by Alba De Céspedes, translated by Anne Goldstein. Forbidden Notebook was originally published in... When was it originally published? In 1952, in Italian. And it has, I think, only more recently been translated into English. I don't really know exactly how long this book has been translated into English, and I believe she has another book being translated later this year. But I think it seems like she's fairly new to the English world. So this book follows Valeria, who is a housewife, and one day on a whim she picks up this notebook from like it sounds like her local bodega, like little corner store, and in it she starts to keep a diary. So there are no chapters in this book, they're all just dated different days, and she writes fairly frequently, and what comes out of it is her desire to become more than what she is seen to those around her. So it's her husband Michel, and her children Ricardo and Morella. And she has essentially just become a mother. Like, that's her entire identity to her. And it's such a fascinating look at what it is to still want to be a woman and be independent and not want to necessarily give up the identity of being a wife or a mother, but needing to understand to herself and those around her that that is not all who she is. So here's the thing. This is the type of book that makes me wish I had studied literature in university, because I wish I had people that I could talk to about this book. It did so much to me as I was reading it, like what it made me feel. When I first started reading this book, I genuinely could only read a couple chapters at a time because it made me feel so claustrophobic. Like, I just felt like I was stuck in this small little room and I couldn't get out because of the way she was writing about how she was feeling. And I've never had that happen in a book before. It is crazy to me that a writer can make me feel that way, and I'm floored. So what's really interesting is I almost DNF'd this book because of that, and yet I don't even know that it's a 5-star read, but because of what it's made me feel, I have a really hard time. Like, this is what all other books of 2024 are going to have to go up against, and I'm excited that that's the first book of the year that did that to me, but I'm also kind of upset because I have a hard time wondering like what could possibly beat what this book has done. So on page 13, she talks about how her husband calls her mama, doesn't really call her by her first name. And then she says at the bottom that she kind of regrets that her husband does that, because Michelle was the only person for whom I was Valeria. For some friends, I'm still Passiani, their schoolmate. For others, I'm Michelle's wife, the mother of Ricardo and Morella. For him instead, since we met, I've been only Valeria. And it's like her name has so much meaning to her, and she's lost that part of her because nobody calls her by Valeria anymore. They call her by mom or something else, and it's like she's lost a piece of that. And it was so fascinating. And it's also, she talks about how she brings home this notebook to write in this diary, and she has no space of her own to hide this diary. Like, she doesn't even have a drawer. It's brought up at one point that she talks about how she wishes she had a drawer that she could lock to just have her own tiny little space. And her family like laughs at that. They wonder, well, why could you possibly need a diary? Why would you possibly need your own space? And this conversation, it like made me feel tight. I can't describe it. It's so fascinating. As the story progresses, her children are entering into adulthood, but they still live at home. And so she kind of starts to get a little bit more freedom in that she can make excuses because they can technically kind of take care of themselves, and they start to kind of push their own boundaries. And it's a look at how she discovers a couple of things that she could do, but whether or not she wants to go through with them. And it's so fascinating because you kind of almost hope that she does, even though they aren't behaviors that you should encourage in people. But you want her to be able to express herself and to find herself because of how trapped she's feeling. And it is such a, it's so crazy. And the author herself has a really interesting background, and you can see that in her writing. She's really pushing what would have thought to have been appropriate for a housewife at the time that this book was published. And I love books like this, and I love books that stay with you, because if I did star ratings, and I've talked previously about why I don't, and this is why I don't, because first of all, I almost DNF'd this book, and then when I got started through it, and it was like maybe like a 3 or 4, but now it's been 2 weeks since I finished it, and it's still on my mind, and how is that not a 5-star read? So that is why I need to talk to somebody about this book. I need other people to read this book and talk to me about it, because there's so much going on, and I am not eloquent enough to be able to say everything that I want to say here. All I know is that this is an incredibly good translation. I'm so glad that as an English reader, I am able to consume this book, because it has been around for a very long time, and I'm so glad that somebody put the time into translating it into a language that I understand. It's so good, guys. It is so good. And I think that you need to read it. So that is all. This has been probably all over the place, but